Good day, everyone, and welcome to our Bloomberg prognosis event on the equality issues in cancer care. I'm Drew Armstrong. I'm Bloomberg's senior editor for healthcare, and we're going to be talking about an issue that has been heightened, even if it already did exist, by the COVID-19 pandemic, one that has filled hospitals with patients, but also cut off many people from access to care for other diseases. I'm joined today by Susanne Schaffert, president of Novartis Oncology, one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical researchers and manufacturers, and by Bernd, the CEO of Siemens Healthineers, which makes equipment used in hospitals around the world for imaging, diagnostics, and therapy. I should also mention that Siemens Healthineers is a sponsor of today's event, but let's go ahead and jump right in. I want to talk first and ask both of you to answer this question just about how the pandemic has reshaped or impacted cancer care. We hear a lot about patients who haven't been able to get in for screening or for therapy. Where are we going to see that both in the short-term effects that I think we've heard a lot about, but what are going to be the longer-term impacts of that? How is that going to play out over the next several years? Bernd, I'll go to you first, and then Susanna, we can kick you off after that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we track that very closely by looking how our machines are used both in the imaging side and on the diagnostic side. And there was a clear period, where check-up procedures, screening, but even semi-urgent care was not delivered, simply because either hospitals had other priorities, needed to have other priorities, or because patients were concerned to go to the hospitals. So there is certainly an effect, a significant effect of delayed care, which means that certain cancers will have been caught later than normal, which certainly will have a negative impact.
Are you all able to see that then in the usage statistics for your machines that are in hospitals? You were able to actually plot the kind of the decline in usage stats over time, or the type of usage that was being done?
I mean, what we can do, I mean, we are very, of course, operating within the limits we have in sniffing what our customers are doing. But when we look at usage data, we have definitely seen usage going down, especially during the first wave, while it's now coming, has since about 9 months come back to more or less normal levels. But that delay of screening exams and also elective procedures, especially around the first wave, has been very pronounced.
Susanna, are you all seeing similar things? And I'm wondering if that affects the type of people or the characteristics of folks who are able to make it into care, because I think we all know that a lot of times, people who have more resources are more able to navigate these types of obstacles in certain cases. I'm wondering what you all have seen I know every pharma company out there closely tracks pharmaceutical prescribing data. Talk to me about what you all are seeing broadly in this area.
Yeah, I mean, during the pandemic, our focus was really on supplying and supporting patients already on treatment, and I believe that has worked very well. There was a lot of strategies around how we can make sure patients receive their therapies, how we ship things, home delivery, home nursing systems. So that was quite great. I mean, as Bernd laid out, diagnostics and screening was really missed, and there's millions of people that did not get their screenings. Like in Europe, we know there's around 1 million patients that are not diagnosed, that probably carrying around cancer disease. And what this means, and that's for me really the call to action, is that there is calculation that say the progress we have made on cancer care has been put back by a decade with the pandemic. And you know how hard we work to improve outcomes and improve survival rates for cancer. That's at the end what matters. And we know that all the misses that we had during the pandemic is putting this back 10 years or more. So it requires that we find new strategies to keep on fighting against this deadly disease and give more people life.
Were there certain healthcare systems or places in the world that you all saw able to navigate this more effectively? I'm thinking, again, back to what I mentioned. These impacts don't always get felt the same way. I live in a relatively wealthy area with good broadband. I was actually able to see and get a medical condition diagnosed online via video visit for my personal care physician. Not everybody has that, and I know oncology, the stakes are certainly a lot higher. Did you all see differing impacts of those types of things around the globe?
I mean, definitely yes. Certainly the adoption rate of telemedicine and digital tools comes at different speeds. Yeah? So I think here, to maybe focus on the US, we saw a quicker uptick. On the other hand, as a downside, when looking at the US, the topic of hospitals depending so much on elective procedures and then even closing down operations because of the lack of cash flow, so to say, is a downside. Yeah. So where we saw, for example, in the European, but also in the Asian systems, which are a little bit more publicly organized, or organized by the public, we saw a higher stability of the overall system.
And Susanne, what about you all? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Drew.
No, go ahead. I was hoping you would chime in there, actually.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what we see from our side, that you saw this inequality certainly between countries, and unfortunately low and low income countries were really impacted most. But as Bernd said, even within a country like the US, you saw these inequalities. You saw the outcome of COVID was different, but it's the same in cancer, that certain populations really were disadvantaged, and that's something we really have to address.
Bernd, you mentioned the telemedicine uptake rate, and I wanted to ask you about that. What changes in care delivery that we've seen over the last 18 months do you all believe are permanent and sticky and will stay around? Because I mentioned, my personal visit to a physician, I had to go to a cardiologist to go get my cholesterol reviewed. And this was maybe a month ago after our hospitals were reopened and things have calmed down. One of the things they said is, we're doing all visits like this in person now. And so, medical professionals we know see kind of a return to habit. I'm sure that there are billing incentives to get them back to do that. What are these changes through the pandemic that, in I think some cases, made care more accessible for some patients? What do we think remains sticky and remains around? And then a second part of that question, are there particular conditions or something like that this will be stickier for? I certainly feel fine getting a primary care, cholesterol discussion done with my, cardiologist over video. If I had just been diagnosed with cancer, I would probably feel far different about that. Can you all walk me through what you believe stays out of the changes we've seen, and what truly is a more structural shift?
I'm thinking about what number to give here when I echo what Susanne said about what is a step maybe backwards in cancer care. I think there's a leap forward when it comes to the adoption of digital tools and telemedicine. So, and I was thinking, should I say 5 years or 10 years? Yeah, when it comes to the adoption and the willingness to accept, hey, this reversal of the default, which we saw during the pandemic, that the on-site is not what you want, but you try to do as much without physically meeting, has proven a lot, into many, that it is possible. And I think that is, on the one hand, for the more simple cases, as you refer to, but on the other hand, also in cancer, where I sometimes call it hunting for the second or third opinion, is still there, and will stay for a while. These are also things which can be done remotely, because in the end it's about getting access to the physician with all the data basically already there, and it's just that second or third look on the same situation. Yeah, so I believe it has brought us an acceleration of these different way of distributing knowledge, yeah, between caregivers, but also between patient and caregivers by 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and maybe what I believe is telehealth and having these engagements between a treating physician and a patient virtually, this will stay and will also take a huge burden from patients. I mean, not everybody is aware that patients that are treated in centers, and this is really the majority of cancer patients, they have to travel for every quarterly routine check, I don't know, 40 to 100 miles. And of course, with telehealth, there is the possibility that they can stay at home and that they avoid this travel. I mean, there is also a lot of home monitoring possibilities that certainly also Bernd could talk about, that will bring additional convenience to patients, that they avoid all this travel during such a intense treatment. That I believe will stay. And it's then also the education piece. That for me was quite unique about COVID. First of all, that everybody collaborated, that we could break down silos that existed maybe before, and that education information was made available to many, and to all stakeholders. And I hope that that will help patients to navigate their way easier, as Bernd, as you mentioned, the second opinion, all these kind of things, that we can educate patients on how to navigate, how to find your best center, your best treatment option. That is hopefully something that will stay.
Are you all seeing those kind of shifts, in this most recent phase of, healthcare system openness? Are you all seeing that in the numbers you all see in terms of how patients access care and where that's coming? I mean, what are the trends you're actually seeing on the ground so far in terms of the kind of long-term evolution of those types of remote care and distributed care?
I mean, in healthcare, it's always an ecosystem of many players here, because it's the patient, it's the provider, it's the payer, and typically when you change practice, it requires openness of the patient. It requires also the willingness of the provider to adopt to change, and it is about the willingness of the payer to also finance it, yeah, or to change reimbursement. And this is also what often makes change in healthcare a little bit slower than elsewhere. And what I can observe is really that this openness is much more pronounced, yeah, that all three pull in the same direction.
I want to ask you to change gears here a little bit. Neither of you are COVID vaccine manufacturers, obviously, but I think everybody in the healthcare industry watched the development of these vaccines quite closely. And there was a different relationship with government, with the regulatory bodies. I would probably say a different approach to risk-taking in what can often be a very, very expensive development process. So you talk to pharmaceutical CEOs, usually their kind of de-risking process can play out over years and years and years because of the investment that's needed. When you all look at that process and think about your own processes for where you enter new businesses, how you work with governments, and how you pursue research and think about the type of risk you're willing to take under what conditions, how much has the experience of the pandemic and the observations of the pandemic changed the way you approach those things in your businesses and how you think about them and what you're willing to do? Susanne, can we go to you first on that?
Yeah, sure. As you know, the drug development process is a very long one, and it's also hard to find the right cancer drug. Just to give you an idea, only 1 out of 15 cancer assets will finally make it to approval. So therefore, we have to be very bold in how we develop things, and we know that the time is years. What was interesting at COVID is, as you nicely said, Drew, was this willingness to take risks and do things in a completely new, very disruptive way. I mean, just to share a few things that we have done, as we also worked with others on exploring therapies and things like that, for example, trial recruitment suddenly was done digitally. That was a no-go before, and now suddenly it was absolutely appropriate to go out to the social networks and see where are patients and accelerate this. And then even the monitoring, as you know, this is a quite cumbersome and highly regulated process. Monitoring visits were done remotely just to keep trials going. And these kind of things really were, of course, pushed with the willingness to take more risk and speed. What it required is close dialogue with regulators and with healthcare systems in general. That is, for me, the learning that we have to keep on doing, engage early in the dialogue and bring people together before there is a final solution. And hopefully the openness to go disruptive ways will stay.
Bernd, what are your observations on this? How do you think this is going to affect the innovation in the industry over the long term?
Yeah, I think what has definitely changed is that the public and governments look at healthcare differently. Yeah? It's not as a cost factor, but this is a super important part of the economy, but also of the welfare and competitiveness of a nation. Yeah, and it's not like, whoa, here they go again, and this is also expensive and so on. But that this is really at the forefront of innovation, and there is more openness and also more openness for dialogues. And what also helps, I think, is to see, I looked it up today again. I mean, it's very, very sad, yeah, that I think up to now 4.6 million people died of COVID worldwide, yeah. But cancer is 20 million incidents per year, yeah. So it's always hard to compare the two, yeah, but that topic to basically address, we are talking about a pandemic which is always there, yeah? And looking at what can we learn from COVID to deal with this pandemic we got used to is a different angle of looking at things, which helps us and I think medicine to also question some of the principles of the past.
Bernd, I want to ask you a question that is going to sound like it's a computing and an AI question, but it's actually also an equality question. We've heard for a long time, and I've been covering healthcare for 15 years, and over the last several years, I get constant pitches about imaging AI and deep machine learning to do imaging. And this is something that kind of feels like it's always on the brink of breaking through and helping democratize diagnosis and bring quality diagnosis to more people, because obviously one of the big constraints in healthcare is having, expert technicians and doctors be able to go out there and read scans and do diagnosis and do imaging work to find types of conditions. What is your view? I mean, I'm sure you guys see and look at this technology all the time. I'm sure you get pitched it. I know you all do work here in the machine learning space and quite a bit of it. Where are we on the development of imaging AI and deep learning and being able to truly see a breakthrough here? Is there even going to be a kind of, big breakthrough aha moment where, for many instances, a computer can replace a doctor? Or is this just going to be an era of kind of small incremental improvement and efficiency for years and years and years, and there won't be some big aha moment that we all look up and say, oh my gosh, the world has changed?
I think there will be an oh my gosh, but not in one moment. But when we look back, what has the internet done to us, or what has the iPhone done to us over the years, yeah, we will see it in hindsight. Yeah, and we are a leader when it comes to AI development. I mean, a real leader when it comes to the technologies we have, the patents we have, and here it's really about gradually taking over tasks, routine tasks of physicians, of radiologists, so that they can focus on the more difficult topics and can work top of license. And I think what we also should not forget that there's an element of democratizing imaging in AI, because there are still billions of people who live in a world where there is no radiologist, and where technology is a solution to the staff shortage. And here the progress is pretty fast. But I think we should have a bit of a less controversial way of putting it. Well, we are replacing the doctor. We are, on the one hand, bringing the doctor where there is no doctor, and on the other hand, we allow highly qualified radiologists not to spend valuable time with routine tasks.